You're listening to an episode recorded during the time Innovation Fuel was part of University Canada West. We are proud and grateful for the work we've done together, and we want to thank the university for being in our podcast. We are now excited to continue the journey of Innovation Fuel into its next chapter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Innovation Fuel, a business podcast by University Canada West.
Bringing you fantastic stories from accomplished entrepreneurs and key industry professionals. Let's explore the entrepreneurial world through local businesses and our university community.
Good morning, Dave.
Oh, wow. you trying out for a musical?
No, I feel energetic today.
You feel energetic today? How come?
I let it have some time, me time. Last night, it was a good time.
Oh.
That's it.
Well, why don't you spend that time in the virtual reality world, like the Metaverse?
Absolutely. I mean, it took me 6 years to spend a time with a friend that didn't look at me as a mom or as a colleague, you know? It took me 6 years just be with my friend, and just if I had the virtual reality options, I could do more, spend more time with someone that they didn't look at me as a parent, you know, talking about their kids, or as a colleague talking about the work, some kind of discussions around other stuff that I forget to talk, you know?
Yeah, but we've talked about this before, Gelareh. We talked about the equality and inclusion elements, and we think about the metaverse and the virtual reality world. Well, we can take on avatars of different individuals within this space, and we can get to feel what, say, for an example, you know, if anybody has not met me before, I'm a white male, and maybe I go into the metaverse being a woman and feel what it feels like to be a woman, and people coming and chatting with me in the metaverse or in that virtual reality, so I can have that experience, or taking on a different culture, taking on a different skin color, and see how that experience is.
And I would love to experience what's your feeling as a white man, because everyone is talking like that, because I really want that experience and see that what the differences is. And also we have a lot of training in schools, in companies about diversity, equity, and inclusion, through lectures, through role playing. But it's still, I know when I'm doing a role playing, I know I'm not a man, or I'm not, for example, belonging to the specific LGBTQ people, you know? I don't know that. So it would be great if I can experience it. Because when you experience it, you absorb and you learn more. And I think that is a great virtual reality metaverse is a great tool to experience others people feeling.
And I think we might have someone today that take us on a little bit of that journey.
Yes. Let's welcome Ruth Diaz, the expert of EDI, Equity, Diversity, Inclusions in Virtual Reality. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Gelareh. Oh, we are so excited to hear Ruth, virtual reality, metaverse. Oh my God, these are exciting topics. But before we get going, this is Innovation Fuel, brought to you by University Canada West. And before we get going, Ruth, we need to know a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit about Ruth.
Yes. So a little bit about me is I fell down the rabbit hole of virtual reality pretty hardcore when COVID started, as two reasons. One was for professional interest. So I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I've worked as a therapist, no longer, but I used to be a therapist. And I've also been a facilitator of group processes, both in the therapy realm, but also with leadership for years now. I've developed a conflict resiliency model years ago that has been really transformative for many different populations, from organizations to where it was originally developed, which was inpatient psychiatry with children. And it's a three-dimensional model that I've been teaching in 2D for years on whiteboards and on screens. And so my original interest in virtual reality about 5 or 6 years ago was to develop this model in 3D and actually get to like walk around it and look at it. And my brother, Paul, was generous enough to give me his computer system to get started back when the original, like one of the first VR mainstream headsets, the Rift, was the one that I still have off in the corner. It's getting dusty. So that all to say, COVID brought me into VR pretty hardcore personally also, because it was very isolating to live on my own 24/7. And then as I did that, I realized we needed to build communities on purpose in virtual reality, because even a few years ago, it was a technology for mostly privileged white males that were wanting to game. And I was really feeling the absence of diverse voices and presence and perspectives. And I kept thinking, Meta, Microsoft, you need to get on this, make spaces, make welcome mats, like make accessible places that when anybody who does have intersectional minority status comes in, they're going to say, they're ready for me. They made space for me. I belong here. And instead, I was finding that, even if I met somebody who identified as marginalized or diverse, they would leave pretty quick and I would never see them again. And if I did, I would ask them, why did you go away? And they would say, I don't know, but I guess I just didn't find where I fit. And so that led me on a journey of taking this conflict resiliency model and all of my other training and starting to build spaces and events that taught people actively with each other how to invite and include and release their privilege.
That is very interesting. So what are your clients right now? Who are they?
I can tell you a little bit about them generally. I can't name names, but yeah, I work as a community design developer consultant and trainer. And so I work with different companies who are wanting to get involved in the metaverse. And some of that means they want to actually have a presence there and have a space or a world that they can call their own, where they can send their employees and they can send their customers and say like, hey, when you get in the metaverse, you stop by, take a picture, like hashtag, post, and other companies are already starting to do events where they have staff retreats and they have product launches. And so I help companies understand, with whatever size they are and whatever their product is, how do I fit? How do I fit in there in a way that works with my budget and really, invests early in this 3D web that we all can feel kind of the black hole of it that's sucking us in. And specifically within that, my mission with VR Create Connect is to infuse the conversation from the first introduction all the way to the event or the world release itself with DEI content, diversity, equity, and inclusion content. How do we create relationships and spaces of belonging for the people that are the last to be included? And how do we make that an ongoing practice, from how even we group up in virtual reality to take a selfie, to take a picture? Are we including the people that get pushed off to the side the most? Are we putting them in the middle? It's very practical. Are we making spaces that reflect the people where they're at? Like, we had a community member who came into virtual reality and was sliding around the ring, because very few applications you don't have legs, so you have torsos, and it's a little weird at first, but he's sliding around and we're all the same height, and he felt very insecure because in physical reality he's bedridden and he has a wheelchair when he's mobile, and he loves his wheelchair, and he said, I don't feel comfortable here. I don't walk. I don't stand up. This isn't right for me. And so he said this to the community, and they gave him application building tutorials where like, hey, you can build your wheelchair. And he didn't respond to that. And my spidey senses tweaked. And I said, can you just send me some pictures of your wheelchair and we'll figure it out? And so he did. And we built it and we programmed it so that when he comes into the world, he can push a button and it attaches to him, and it's identical to his wheelchair in physical reality. And he was just thrilled with this when he came in and discovered this. And turns out he has a disorder where every muscle movement in his body is excruciatingly painful. So, I trusted my senses that like he wasn't going to be the one to build. He put the axle on the bottom of his wheelchair. That was his contribution at the very end. But Otherwise, he needed people to really make it super accessible for him to believe and see that he belonged.
This sounds very great in the way that you're allowing the accessibility of anybody to go through this element. But going back to that spidey senses, like, yes, we're in the virtual reality and we're moving in this direction, this virtual reality, and we're making it more accessible, but you still have to bring in some other pieces into this because at the end of the day, it could be accessible, but we don't know what the other circumstances are behind the reality of this.
Yeah, in some ways, VR is a great equalizer if you have access, if you can hear, if you can see. So there's already limitations of senses right now that definitely are keeping out some of our marginalized populations. For the people who can access, how do we make that bubble as big as possible to include the most people? And how do we use our time that most people, the majority of people who buy these headsets are not there to do their volunteer work in the world, right? But yet the reality is our planet is in crisis. We're all in some level of crisis with everything we've been through on this planet just in the last couple of years alone. And so we have to start budgeting our time differently in a sustainable way. And if we're really in a safe and privileged enough place to put a headset on, it's a radical, and radical, the word radical has one of its origins in just the root of a tree. The anchor root of a tree is what radical means. And the anchor root of a tree is the one that goes straight down and helps the tree grow straight up. And so the radicalness of saying, how do we grow deeply in virtual reality to grow better in physical reality? How do we make that time meaningful and engaging and invigorating and fun? And that's what VR Create Connect is working to solve and answer and collaborate on and build community around, with not just individuals and people who are there in their recreational time, but also brands. Like, how do we make meaningful advertisements for products that aren't just about endlessly selling and capitalizing on people's attention, but actually adapting the product and meeting the community and feeling how the product is actually landing and becoming something in somebody's life that doesn't just create junk or extra in our lives, but actually helps empower us to be better humans.
Well, and I love it because it does open to the world of engagement and getting involved. And we know that branding and that element has gone very far away from this. We see the changes in this element with third-party cookies being left from, and this disrupted marketing is changing. But I come back, one of the things I want to go back to, Ruth, is that we had this exposure with social media, and social media comes in. We start to see people generating more riskier behavior with social media, meaning that almost multiple personalities. Like, when I'm in person, I'm this person, but when I'm online, I'm this person. Does this not open up another world of people trying to be and people looking for an escape from reality?
That's such a great point. And this is where I think it makes me semi-unique in virtual reality as kind of one of the pioneers with a psychology background. It's endlessly fascinating to me how quickly CEOs of massive companies, brands we all know, will put on a headset, and in psychology would be called regression. They would regress down to a 2-year-old or 5-year-old self and just start micro trolling people and putting stuff in people's faces and flying around like a manic fly, there's zooming around. And how quickly, instinctually, those inner children inside of us just unleash themselves and are like, I've been waiting for 1,000 years to just let myself be playful and not have to think about it. So it definitely, that immersion brings an instinct in us to explore the unexplored, the shadow parts of us, the villain parts of us, the hero parts of us. A lot of people, when they go in and they create things, they will create archetypal stories of heroes. Like Thor's hammer has been created in virtual reality so many times. Thor, if he exists, is I'm over that. That's been copied too many times. But yeah, people are looking for power, and they're looking for influence, and they're looking for how they can be that hero on their own journey. And sometimes that includes figuring out what it means to be a villain. And so there's a lot more fluidity and requirement of flexibility, even in facilitating events and spaces. Literally, I was doing a workshop yesterday where somebody spoke up right before we were going to leave the space and go somewhere else. They said, I feel disrespected right now. And thankfully, they didn't call anyone directly out, but they just were really struggling with how some of the people in the space were maybe behaving or whatever. And so we slowed it way down and we talked about what it meant to feel disrespected and what it meant to respect and how we could create environments that fit everybody better. So we were more present with each other and communicating that on purpose.
I want to go back to that feeling that you said and experiencing, because the Forbes saying that the EDI training, it's in United States, companies spend $8 billion in the traditional methods, and actually it brings more harm than good. But when you do the virtual reality one, you can experience someone else's experience. For example, I can be an American white man that's experienced of Middle Eastern woman with accent and see how the people react. I want to know how that experience can impact of people's behavior in later on.
Yeah, thank you for that. So what you're talking about is avatar, what's called skins. So different applications allow different kinds of avatar skins. The one that I spend the most time in is Horizon Worlds, that is created by formerly Facebook, now Meta. And only avatar skins they allow are human-looking avatars. So they look like cartoon versions of all of us in physical reality. And most people eventually will customize their avatars to look like themselves. But initially, when you come in, you are usually randomly assigned some kind of avatar. And so many people have had the experience of just going like, okay, sure, that's who I am. And it might randomly assign you to be dark skinned and maybe white skinned and male or whatever. And so you will go in, and especially if you're not speaking, people are going to start treating you a way that you might not even remember that you're in that skin, but you can feel how people are behaving differently towards you. And the most powerful thing I've heard is white passing males coming in darker skinned avatars and feeling and experiencing immediate and frequent microaggressions and marginalizing and sometimes direct targeting, where people will use racial slurs and will assume that they do not know what's going on, will kind of just like marginalize them repeatedly. And they will sit there and go, oh, maybe I don't like VR. And then eventually they'll change their avatar and go, oh, wait, that was all about the skin I was wearing. And I didn't realize how constant this is. And it really brings up a different question process of going, how am I doing that? And how am I participating? How am I being a bystander to that? And so that immersion piece is important, but also I really like what you mentioned around the Forbes article, because DEI work, kind of like addictions treatment, right? We've all heard of the typical intervention where the circle surrounds you and says, you're messing up and we're on to you. So interventions are massively harmful. They shame people, they break communities, they don't work. There's a less well-known concept, but I like the idea of it as polarity to the intervention called a centervention, where people surround you and they say, thank you for what you've brought. And you're turning really chaotic and we don't know what to do with that, but we want to let you know you were healing for me. You made a difference for me. And if you're going to die from whatever this chaos is, I want to say thank you. I don't want to miss on this chance to say you are important to me and you gave me something and thank you. And so centervention is the other side of it, right? So in DEI work has focused on saying, look, you have prejudice. Here's proof. I'm going to measure all the ways that you're biased. And it's excruciatingly uncomfortable. I've been through those trainings to like sit there and go like, oh no, I'm not even in charge of myself. I don't even know how I'm pushing people away and leaving them out. And so that's really, really unpleasant, but also like, what do I do with that? And so what we're finding with DEI work is that revealing that to people and focusing on that a lot is not really helpful. People don't do a lot with that. They'll sit there and they'll pass their tests and then they go back to their old behaviors because it's just super overwhelming. Instead, actually like putting people through the shoes of the people they might feel biased towards or uncomfortable around and saying like, so a few nights ago, I was with someone in VR who is a white male and had been a radio host for many, many years and had been in charge in other jobs of people who were diverse and did harm. And in VR, people kind of like drop deeper and they are willing to say things they wouldn't say in physical reality. And this person was revealing that he had been really biased and actually gotten people who were LGBTQ fired in big companies with a thought that they were hooligans. You know, I mean, he's an older man. So he was using these very outdated terms of like those misfits or whatever. And yet he said, two of my closest friends in here are those people. And I've started to realize that I never actually understood that they're human and they're brilliant. And I have missed so much in my life. And part of his pathway to that was that he learned to laugh again for the first time in many years. He said that he learned to laugh in VR deeply and it's transformed his life. So when we learn to like release those expectations of how who's our villains, who's adverse to us, we open ourselves to new learning and new possibilities and new relationships. And so it's a much more fluid process to do DEI work in VR.
I do believe that people absorb more when they experience it, rather than retelling them, lecturing them. That
in virtual reality, if you have a DEI metaphor, I can create that around you while you're talking. So that fluidity to be able to like touch it, engage in it, bounce it, like be overwhelmed by it, but do it by choice can really transform us deeply. It's like our psyches are being projected out.
Ruth, you mentioned in that conversation about this microaggressions. Tell us a little bit more about what microaggressions are. And then how does the virtual reality help us conquer that?
Yes. So I can microaggress like right now, immediately. I can microaggress, and I may have been doing it already. We're always holding ourselves in the world in ways that's going to bump into each other. It becomes a microaggression. I was clapping my fists together because we think we're distant because we're on Zoom or whatever else, but we assume things about each other constantly. And in that respect, not just stepping on each other's toes, but if I, as a white passing female, did something, especially to Gelareh, did I say your name correctly?
Gelareh, but it's fine. Thank you.
Well, but this is actually a really good example. A, if I didn't ask that question. And secondly, just the fact that I didn't practice that ahead of time or I didn't really listen before, that could be considered a microaggression. That could be an exhausting experience for you in life that you're just having to like give people permission to not say your name correctly. And so I'm sorry, and I want to do better, and I get to keep cleaning this up. And so microaggressions are pieces that we're doing all the time, either by, like, I might avoid saying your name because I feel uncomfortable with saying it wrong. And then what I'm doing is I'm erasing you in this moment, and you're feeling like you're having to insert yourself in the conversation. You're not being called on. And that's uncomfortable too. So microaggressions are like, it's not just something like the bad employees do. We're always doing these to each other, and learning how to clean those up and learning how to do it different is a fluid, ongoing process. I have privilege. I have so much privilege in the world, and that's going to make me blind at times to how I'm taking up space. And microaggressions is what I'm going to do when I take up space in a way that just steamrolls over someone else because they've been steamrolled all day or all their life. And so it's just another thing of like, Ruth says she gets it, but does she?
Yes, I can really relate to that one because, you know, I like my name and I don't want to have a nickname that people can pronounce my name better. And it is sometimes I feel sad, deeply sad, when I see that I have a very good connection with someone and I think that person is my friend, but that person cannot even remember my name.
Thank you for saying that.
It's really, really sad. I feel that person is struggling to remember my name, but dude, I'm your friend, you know, just to practice a bit.
Yes, practice it.
But then after a while, I said that maybe they are not my friend. That is a really good example.
It matters so much.
Yeah, I was just saying on the other side of it, and this maybe goes back into why virtual reality and Ruth having this opportunity, and it goes back to the same thing that you had mentioned before, Ruth, is that maybe people feel uncomfortable going further with it. Maybe they only can say, "Oh, can I ask again how to pronounce that again? Because I really haven't got it yet, and I'm really nervous about asking again." But maybe this virtual reality allows them to be a little bit more riskier in being a little bit more and pushing them a bit further.
And not only that, but for most applications, it's pretty fluid to be able to change the name that you're wearing above your head. So your name tag isn't on your body like a little sticker, it's above your head. So a lot of people, when they come in, they pick archetypal names, and they will pick like superhero names or like random things that you can't even pronounce. And so everybody's always having trouble pronouncing each other's names and figuring out what part of the 20 letters in front of us we're going to select as the way we name each other. Of being, so we have somebody who's facilitating an event right now who's in the community I helped run, that the first part of their name is crack, and it can be perceived as like crack cocaine or something. But really, it's got an X on the end of it. So they meant it to be said as cracks. And most people don't want to add on that extra kind of complexity. And so that had to be a whole conversation that we had. And how did they want me to name them to people? And so, it's a more accepted cultural piece to continually be struggling with each other's names and finding ways to do it better, and then changing our names if we're just sick of people calling us the wrong part of what we name, just being like, no. So I've seen people who have names that can be more difficult to pronounce by mainstream white male or patriarchal dominated culture, that they will actually phonetically spell out their name for people. And then just, they experiment with, how do I get people to say my name? And, they'll put little phrases like, it rhymes with this, and see if that works. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of, I saw a couple of people who have built entire worlds on their name. They're actually just going like, okay, we're really going to get into this. After you've gone through this, you're going to know how to say my name. I think there's all kinds of much more fluid possibilities to teach each other.
Yes, perfect, Ruth. I think it's a time for us to throw us a challenge for our students and see that's how they can solve their problem.
I think the piece that I most commonly am recommending to people who haven't ever experienced virtual reality or the metaverse is, instead of asking yourself, will I fit? Or when will I fit? Just know that you're going to fit, that we're all funneling into this 3-dimensional web that will look like a lot of different things. It will plug in, and it already is plugging into social media as we know it. So I don't say this very often, but I believe the metaverse is a bridge for us as a global network to like truly find our village and build what we want. And so the challenge is, start visioning what your global village looks like for you. It's not going to probably be 1 million people. If that's it, that's more like your followers and your brand or something. But your village of who is your tribe? Who are you? And forgive me if that's microaggressive. I've just learned that recently. That's why I like to use village. So who is the people that surround you that you can imagine in the future, that when you have a bad day, when you mess up, you can always go there and say, I didn't do this the way I wish I had. And there's going to be somebody to receive you and remind you of your brilliance and your light, and also your growing, how much you've changed and transformed. And so thinking about it like that, instead of will I belong or when will I belong, you do belong. We're all alive today. Those people who you're going to meet and build relationship are alive right now. And you're on a path to find them and feel that sense of belonging in a very different way than you ever have. And so starting to really bring that up in your awareness. And what then I encourage you to do is source back to those inner kids in you. Think about when you were a child, what were your favorite colors? Who did you want to be when you were going to grow up? And start writing out your ideas of what is the space that would help you belong in a place where what you imagine can become your environment and can become true. And that will prepare you so much more to hit the ground running, so to speak, even though we don't have legs in VR. Hit the ground running with that creative imagination when you get in there. And also remember that when you get in there, it's going to feel a little bit like learning how to breathe underwater. Everybody feels bad at it at first. They feel brand new, like they've never been to school. They don't know the right language. They can't even navigate. Feel really bad. And so just knowing there's going to be an adjustment process and weaving those two concepts together. How do I belong? How do I want to belong? Those questions. Plus, I'm going to feel really bad at this at first. It's very rare that somebody comes in and they're just like, oh yeah, I can move my avatar and speak and navigate completely fine and I can create perfectly. It's very awkward in the beginning. So just knowing that, and it doesn't mean you don't belong. And if you find a hole or a gap where you don't feel like that village is there to meet you, that means you're the first one there. And so it's time to start creating the welcome mat for the rest of them that are going to find you.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely love it. I think, the next evolution of community building to a digital and through a global digital community is amazing. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Dave. That was another episode of Innovation Fuel. Thank you for listening to Innovation Fuel. We are on all podcast streaming platforms, Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Visit our website at www.ucanwest.ca/Innovation Fuel. Also, follow us on Instagram at innovation_fuel.